There could be no better place to celebrate America's independence than beneath this magnificent, incredible, majestic mountain monument to the greatest Americans who have ever lived. I am here as your president to proclaim before the country and before the world, this monument will never be desecrated. These heroes will never be defaced. Their legacy will never, ever be destroyed. Their achievements will never be forgotten. And Mount Rushmore will stand forever as an eternal tribute to our forefathers and to our freedom.
America, let's celebrate.
Now in New Haven, where a Christopher Columbus statue was removed earlier today.
Statues of Christopher Columbus have been vandalized across the country.
Protesters tried to topple a statue of Andrew Jackson in front of the White House.
This is absolutely important that we constantly disrupt.
Here they come. Radical left.
They hate America.
If we fail to honor George Washington because we only understand him as a slave owner, we're done.
An online petition asking for the removal of the Mahatma Gandhi statue at Fresno State.
The statue of Theodore Roosevelt is coming down.
The radical left narrative.
Shut your fucking privilege and get back over there.
A statue of Thomas Jefferson is not there any longer.
In Belgium, statues of Leopold II,
Canada's first prime minister.
The statue of Winston Churchill.
I don't think any historical figure should be beyond re-evaluation.
Abraham Lincoln was the president responsible for the end of slavery in the United States, and we're going to remove that.
I would never say that all Republicans are racist, but if you are a racist and you're looking for a political party...
I do not believe there's structural racism.
Is this a systemic problem? No. Systemic means America is bad.
Do you think black people are treated differently by law enforcement than white people?
I think there are some situations where they are treated differently, but I don't think that that's necessarily racism.
Some have the power to keep statues up, and some of us have the power to tear those shits down.
You don't get to decide!
History is something that needs to be challenged.
I want the raw, unadulterated truth told about history and the lies to be cleaned up. Because right now we're still telling lies to America's children on President's Day when some of them were slave owners.
Then leave the statues and the monuments up, and you can have the discussion as they stare at what took place.
Pull them racists down.
That's Ulysses S. Grant, the general of the Union Army that saved and freed all African Americans.
And such monuments remain to oppress us, and they remain to celebrate black oppression.
Well, that video was an excellent, if disturbing, introduction to our first plenary session, Democracy versus Ourselves, Divided We Fall. It seems that distrust is not just a problem in the United States, it afflicts democracies across the world. And division and divisiveness is all part of that. The emotions are charged in this discussion, and the stakes really couldn't be higher. To help navigate these troubled waters, it's my pleasure, my honor to welcome three guests. First of all, Tawakkol Karman. Welcome back, Tawakkol, Nobel Peace Laureate and founder of Women Journalists Without Chains in Yemen. Kolinda Grabar-Kitarović, former president of Croatia, also a big welcome to you. Welcome back. And for the very first time, it's a great honor and a pleasure to welcome you, Bishop Garrison, the co-founder and president of the Rainey Center, joining us, I believe, from Alexandria, Virginia. Well, thank you all for being with us. To get us started, I'd like to just get from you all, if you would, some brief opening thoughts about this discussion, which, as I say, the stakes couldn't be higher. And then we'll delve a little more deeply into the subject. Bishop, I wonder if I could turn to you first.
Absolutely, and thank you for having me. This is my absolute honor and privilege to be on such an esteemed panel. First and foremost, as an American man, as an African American, a Black American from the southern region, the southeast of our country, I worry about the direction that we find ourselves in at this critical point in our history. We're at a 10-year high recently in a recently released in a recently released report from the FBI that tells us we're at a 10-year high of hate crimes that we're seeing towards our most vulnerable communities. We find ourselves at one of the most hyper-partisan times in our nation's history. Your viewers just saw this play out in real time in the video that you produced. We have to find a way to bring ourselves together to deal with some of these issues that have plagued our nation for generations. We have yet to ever deal with the original sin of slavery within this country, and it has created a foundation upon which we have built many of the policies that have created many of the inequities and ills within our nation. And if we're not able to deal with these things internally, we're not going to be able to work smartly and rightly with our partners. We're not going to be able to call out the injustice and inequalities that we see in other countries, not without being hypocrites. And now has given us a unique perspective, a unique time in history for us to deal with these issues head on directly so that we can then hold others accountable. We can have these types of conversations. We can talk about human rights and human equality without worrying about what's happening in our backyard. The tragic deaths of George Floyd and of Breonna Taylor weren't the first instances. They were the most recent. This has been for generations plaguing us, and it's time for us to finally take the opportunity to deal with democracy, to deal with these inequalities here at home so that we can continue to be the imperfect nation striving towards greatness that we have the opportunity to be within the global community and continue to take our rightful place as a part of the leadership of it.
Tawakkol, Karman, I mean, that's a very interesting point. I mean, clearly the question of racial injustice in the United States is a matter of the utmost importance for the United States. But America has a certain position in the world, doesn't it? And what happens in the United States is going to affect, first of all, the credibility of the United States to address these kinds of all sorts of injustices around the world. But it also is a beacon, and people follow the example of the United States. I mean, how do you see this problem as somebody who hails from Yemen?
You know, first of all, I'm so happy to be again in Halifax. And yes, we are in one world, and no one can go unaffected by what happens to the others. This, you know, was confirmed by the COVID-19 pandemic, and now by the Trump's, you know, phenomena, and also the situation now in the United States. And also it was, you know, indeed confirmed by the Arab Spring, and further, you know, reinforced by the retaliatory war against our Arab Spring and, you know, popular peaceful, you know, revolution. Divided, you know, we fall, you know, the whole world will fall into tyranny, terrorism, racism, and isolationism. And you know, now the West talks about, you know, the crisis in liberal democratics that began, you know, to appear, you know, in recent years with the rise, you know, of racism, hatred, also xenophobia, etc. And in our, you know, Arab countries, we didn't test the Western democracy. Rather, we knew that, you know, the major countries, including America, Britain, France, you know, colluded with the, you know, support dictatorship. So now, you know, what is happening in the United States is giving us, you know, important lesson in this regard. There is a president who is trying to say that he won the election, while all the indicators say he lost. Autocrats in the region have, you know, breathed a sigh of relief from the state of, you know, uncertainty in the U.S. elections by saying that, look, the democracy what produced. There is, you know, a catastrophic failure and confusion of democracy that could lead to the collapse of the state. But what we hope and what we expect, that the world will realize how great democracy and how inspiring it when we see Donald Trump leave the White House peacefully, regardless with noise against the validity of the election. This is very, very important, and this a great scene of leaving the White House peacefully and letting the elect president to take the power in the U.S. It's this great scene is what makes unity and prevent internal wars and chaos inside the U.S. and also around the world, because any chaos that may happen in the U.S. will affect all around the world, not just the U.S. and U.S. also itself. It's very matter to all over the world.
Kolinda Kitarović, just as we set the scene for this discussion, it strikes me that the former Yugoslavia perhaps holds a lot of lessons and a lot of warnings as well. I mean, after the end of the Cold War and the Balkan Wars started in the 1990s, Yugoslavia became pretty much synonymous to many people with ethnic carnage, with bloodshed. There were terrible problems, as of course you as former president of Croatia will know better than anyone on this panel. To what extent, when division has got to that level, can these problems be overcome?
Thank you, Robin. First of all, hello to everyone around the world. It's an honor to be back, and it's an honor to be on this panel. And yes, indeed, we're talking about a very important issue today, division of societies. And we see it happening across the globe. It's not just the United States. It's not just the former Yugoslavia or the former Soviet Union. We see deeply divided societies, erosion of values, governments unable to address the issues that plague their societies and that are a concern of the people. We have all been looking now to the United States, as you've said, as an example, a beacon of democracy, to see how the process of this deep divisions will continue to unfold, as certainly it will have very heavy repercussions around the world. What I see in the world today are, and I think what's reflected in the United States and what was the case in the former Yugoslavia, apart from historical reasons and the striving of peoples to have their own countries, there are two underlying issues of erosion. First is the erosion of trust, second is the erosion of values, and the third one is the erosion of relationships. When it comes to trust, we know that it's the basis of any human relationship, and trust is the basis of democracy and democratic institutions. And distrust is a corrosive element that undermines any relationship, be it human, be it towards government, or being among the states and worldwide today. That distrust by the citizens, unfortunately, has been motivated by multifaceted factors, including what we see in the media, the kind of reporting that we have that tends to focus on the sensationalist rather than on finding solutions to the issues that we're facing. But in essence, mistrust can really be one of those elements that can lead to dissolution rather than coming together and finding common solutions in this global world today. Second, I mentioned the erosion of values. Again, we see it worldwide. The so-called Western values, which I believe are universal values, are being challenged from all sides. And when it comes to values, I don't see them assigned geographically. I see them as universal human rights and universal values. And this is what Tawakkol has been doing. This is what Bishop has been doing as well in their respective positions. And this is what I tried to do as president as well in terms and in my other capacities in terms of proving that every single individual in this world is entitled to universal human rights and that they cannot be labeled or assigned to any particular country. And the third is the erosion of relationships. So those are relationships within societies, without societies, between people and governments. Governments are perceived as established elites who only take care of their own business, of their own interests, not of the interests of the people. And then we see it also globally. And what I'm also very concerned of as a true transatlanticist, the erosion of the transatlantic relationship that is, I believe, one of the fundamental pillars of the liberal international order that we want not only to preserve, but that we want to promote across the globe.
Thank you, Kolinda, and thank you to all of you. And we're going to come back in just a moment. In the last several days, I had the opportunity to talk to some leading figures on this topic. And we're now going to see some highlights of these conversations. The full interviews will be aired later today and be available on our virtual platforms.
Johns Hopkins did a study that was widely reported in the New York Times in early 2020. Okay, if there's a pandemic, what nations are the best prepared to deal with it? And they said the US was the best prepared. And they were right. We were the best prepared. But right out of the gate, mixed messaging, looking at it through a political lens, not a scientific lens, the differential speed with which other nations embraced testing and social contact tracing and the US didn't. You know, it was going to be tough regardless, but all you have to do is compare the relative death tolls in the US to other nations that have vastly lower GDPs, vastly lower personal income to see that it was mismanaged. And I think that played a critical role in some independent and Republican leaning voters who just felt like, I know we can do better than that.
The United States, for better or for worse, has historically been a beacon, if you will, for democracy and freedom. Not to say that we always do things perfectly, and we're occasionally an imperfect tribune, and we've made serious mistakes. But I think the reality is that people do look at the United States for leadership around the issues that we care about: the promotion of liberty, the promotion of freedom, the promotion of democracy. And I think right now we're in a phase where the United States is something of a tarnished tribune. I think, for instance, of a lot of comments I'm getting from colleagues and others from around the world about the refusal of the president to accept the election results, which really is crucial to democracy, the idea of having a peaceful transfer of power. And I guarantee you that authoritarians around the world, whether it's Maduro in Venezuela, Lukashenko in Belarus, are watching to see how we've handled the election here, and it's a sad situation.
I mean, we know that we're a very divided country, and we know that one of the issues that divides us is immigration, and there's a real fear of the other, and that fear, instead of being addressed over the last 4 years, has been exacerbated, exploited by our own national leadership. And so what we have to do is try to demonstrate that there is no reason to fear refugees, that refugees and immigrants have in fact been one of the factors that have made this country so incredibly strong. There was a study at the beginning of the Trump administration trying to show that refugees were a huge cost to the American taxpayer. What that study actually found was that over time, refugees have contributed $63 billion more in taxes than they took in services. I mean, $63 billion from resettled refugees.
Food for thought indeed. I'd like to turn, first of all, to you, Bishop. I'm a Brit. I live in the United States. I love this country. I see so many of its good sides, so many of the opportunities that America provides to people. It's impossible for anybody who follows the world around them to be unaware of the racial divide in the United States. And one of the questions I ask to people who profess concern about this matter is, okay, I believe I get the point. I'm willing to hear more about it. I'm a white person, a white man. It's possible that I haven't got to the full depths of this issue, and I'm well aware of that. But the thing I always ask people is, what has to be done in concrete terms to overcome this problem? We can talk about systemic racism until the cows come home, and when we should talk about it, but what do we actually do to overcome this problem, Bishop?
Well, I think you just hit the nail on the head. I don't want to try to, have any type of reduction of this and bring it down to the simplest terms, because it's a very complex topic. But ultimately, we need to listen to one another. You need to understand that you, as a white man living in the U.S., has had a different experience than I have as a young African-American man living in the United States. I'm a veteran of the United States Army. I'm a graduate of the United States Military Academy at West Point. But when I'm not wearing a uniform, when I'm not wearing a suit, when I'm not wearing something that identifies me by my background, I become a black man in the United States. So what does that mean? How am I treated? How do others see me out in the world? And this is a very important fact. So fundamentally, I need you to listen and understand that because of my skin color, because of who I am, my immutable traits, I am treated differently from you. That's the first thing. And these conversations, these awkward conversations around race and around gender and around who we are, need to take place at a community level. That is the first thing that we have to do. We have to find a way to get outside of our thought bubbles, outside of our typical ways of addressing one another and thinking through these problems, and meet each other on a very interpersonal level to understand what individuals are going through. Now, if you want to talk about some of the policies that need to be implemented in terms of supporting that ideas, well, we need to look at education. We need to understand why has there been such a massive influx of money, of cost into the education system, because we are separated by the opportunities based upon our genders and our races. So we need to figure out ways through policy of breaking down those barriers. Education is one. Opportunities for economic growth and for long-term systemic generational wealth is another thing that will directly affect our abilities to find the true pursuit of happiness within this country. And the only way we're going to do that is to first and foremost begin listening to one another.
Do you think that, the political situation generally has been very divided in the United States, at least for the last 4 years, and one could argue further back than that. Do you have a sense that with a new administration coming in, the last few years have witnessed some terrible problems in terms of race. The killing of George Floyd is obviously one, but there have been so many other things. Do you have a certain hope that the new administration is going to really get down to brass tacks and really address this problem, rather than just talking about it on the rhetorical level?
Yeah, and I don't want to monopolize the time of the panel, but I will say that I truly believe that President-elect Biden is going to take on this issue head on. A part of this, too, remember, is that we've had a major influx of misinformation and disinformation that, to some degree, has been largely targeted at vulnerable populations, at minority populations, at African Americans and Latinos. And that has also affected the discourse that we're feeling currently in our nation. So having an administration that's going to take on that issue, for starters, having an administration that is going to recognize that white supremacy and violent white extremism are on the rise at levels we haven't seen in decades within the United States, and they're going to actually take that issue on head on. Having an administration that is going to look at fundamental factors of life, at education, at wealth, at economic stability, at the pandemic. The pandemic is affecting minority communities at a rate 3 to 4 times higher than our white counterparts. Having a Biden administration that is going to look at all of these factors and directly address them through policy and, quite frankly, through empathy is something that is absolutely going to affect outcomes here for the positive.
Kolinda, there's no direct analogy between racism, color-based racism, white on black racism in the United States and the ethnic divisions in the former Yugoslavia. And yet the ethnic divisions in former Yugoslavia were unbelievably brutal. And it takes time, as you said a little earlier, it takes time to get over these issues. Bishop mentioned education. In Croatian schools, what are Croatian kids taught about Serbs, to be quite specific?
Well, there isn't any particular teaching about Serbs in Croatia or Serbs in Serbia. I mean, they're the citizens of Croatia, the Serbs equally as Croats. So there's nothing that is taught about particular national minorities. What is very important and what we've been working on is on revising the curricula and modernizing our entire school system in order to educating kids, not just academically, for what they can expect in the 21st century, but also to raising responsible citizens that look to the other, that look to that difference as something that enriches us rather than divides us. And this is what we've been repeating for years and years, that the multilateral, multinational fiber of society can only be a benefit to the country, that our differences enrich us in every respect. And I do agree with Bishop when he says that we need to listen to each other and we need to be inclusive rather than exclusive, even when we disagree with each other. Because if you try to just pose your counter arguments without taking into account the position of the other, then you're just antagonizing them rather than getting them on board to finding the common solutions to the problems that we're facing. And the problems that we're facing today in Croatia are pandemics, economic growth, or rather slowdown of that growth, jobs that are disappearing, the future ahead of us, the challenges of globalization, the good ones and the bad ones, and the school system has to focus on teaching these values of respecting everyone, and respect being really, I believe, the highest, the most important currency in human relations and in relations among states as well. Having been the president of Croatia, when you look at the world, and the reason why we're so much, especially from Europe, looking now to what we hope will be a change in substance, rhetoric, and tone in vis-a-vis the relationship with the United States, we look at what binds us together and what we want to achieve in the future. Because, you know, the title of the panel of itself is divided we fall, but united we stand, as you would say in the United States. And that goes true for the transatlantic relationship and for the relations within any society. I won't say that Croatia doesn't have problems within society when it comes to our differences, but they're not based on ethnic divisions, not any longer. There are some new differences that we need to overcome. And what actually makes me particularly proud when it comes to Croatia is that in this whole migrant crisis, although back in 2015 and 16, it was rather messy in the European Union and it was unfair to migrants themselves. Nevertheless, the Croatian society did not develop any feelings of resentment towards migrants. On the contrary, most people wanted to help them. And what I'm very proud of is, for instance, the Islamic community in Croatia as being one of the most exemplary in Europe, and an example of how we can avoid this xenophobia and the fear of one another, and how we can realize that we actually share so many values together. And therefore, I was actually so pleased and so honored that at the end of my presidency, I was awarded a special recognition by the Islamic community in Croatia for the promotion of our joint values and inter-ethnic and inter-religious dialogue. And this is what needs to happen in divided societies, dialogue, regardless of the lines that you're divided along, whether they are pure politics or they become ideological. And unfortunately, a lot of things are becoming ideological today, including how to deal with the pandemic and how to respond to the virus, which has been labeled in so many ways in different societies, including in Croatia, where there is a number of people who are very skeptical that the virus will actually do you any harm, and they believe that is some kind of government conspiracy. So the best way to counter that is to come up with scientific reasoning and evidence rather than just fighting each other and trying to prove that we're right. Let us be inclusive. Let us involve everyone in the debate. Let that debate be public. And let us agree that we're trying to find the common ground that will bind us together rather than trying to be right ourselves or the other side, and in that way contributing to more divisions within societies and among our countries.
Tawakkol, Kolinda mentioned Islam and Islamophobia. Islamophobia is real. It's one of those things that we've been talking about to some extent for, I suppose, most people who talk about politics have been talking about it since 9/11. There are other divisions or other ethnic divisions in the Middle East. There's the Israel-Palestine conflict. The Christian minorities are suffering terribly in many countries in the Middle East, and then there is problems within Islam. I mean, there's the Sunni-Shia divide as well. The Middle East is not usually talked about with a great deal of optimism when it comes to overcoming these core ethnic identity-based differences. Do you see any hope at all in that region?
Of course, I see a lot of hope, especially if and when Trump administration leave the authority in the U.S. I believe that the hatred and the Islamophobia and all xenophobia and all the problems of hatred and racism become big and big when those racists take the authority in this big and in this what calls the great countries in the world. So with the Trump leaving the authority in the U.S., the wave of hate and intolerance will end not only in America, but also across the world. USA now will be, inshallah, after Trump administration is moving toward ending one of the worst waves of hate in modern history. And regarding the problems in our countries, especially in Islamic countries and in Arab countries, our main problem is our main conflict is and our main struggle is against dictatorship who produce all this kind of chaos, all this kind of wars between Sunni and Shia, between South and North, between Muslim and Christian, between West and Middle East. So all this hatred web is a result of those dictators, and the problem is now is why the Western government is have ally with this dictators. If democracy is good and dictatorship is evil, I would like to ask why this unjustified cooperation between Democrats and dictatorship in the Middle East region. In particular, what we see is not just cooperation, but a union between the Western Democrat and the Arab, dictators that produce all this kind. Even the terrorism is, a result of dictatorism in our region. It is shameful, and a behavior that strikes the values of democracy. That doesn't help people to reach to justice, to reach to freedom, to reach to democracy. So if Western government helps the people in our region to defeat those dictators, to produce a real democracy, you will not see all this, wars, all this conflict. This is kind of counter-revolution that produced by the armed, by the army coups, by the militia wars, by the terrorism, by the occupation for some, countries. So this is the ugly face of those counter-revolution leaders that doesn't want democracy happen or prevail in our country. So to defeat all this kind, it's the solution, only the solution with democracy, and the only solution is that Western government should ally with people who sacrifice, who struggle for freedom, democracy, and not with the dictators.
It's right and proper that we've talked about the racial divide, we've talked about ethnic divides, we've talked about religious divides. Unfortunately, there are even more divides than that, Bishop. I mean, in the United States, just the standard everyday centre-right, centre-left divide. I mean, it's, I live in Washington, D.C., and, you can practically, you just have to worry about what you say sometimes to certain people, even in a relatively innocent discussion, because, the emotions are so high. I mean, it isn't just the last it's easy and tempting to blame the last 4 years, but this has been going on for quite a while, hasn't it?
Unfortunately, it has. But I think Madam President said, divided we fall, but united we stand. And this has really given us opportunities to, again, come together and try to have these awkward conversations, these difficult debates. You're seeing a very hyper-partisan United States right now. Political dialogue is at a fever pitch in which we've never experienced it before. But that doesn't mean that we should not try to address those issues that ail us. We should really be looking at this as an opportunity to have these difficult conversations. Now, I will not argue the fact that there's a part of this that we really haven't addressed yet, and the fact that many, at least from an American standpoint, you have many Americans that are beginning to believe narratives that are outright false, that are not based in fact or reason. That is a large issue that somehow we're going to have to address. When it is incredibly difficult, if not outright impossible, to have a conversation with an individual on a reasonable basis when what they are founding their argument on is absolutely fabricated. So that is something that I would argue is new in our discourse, that we're still trying to figure out how to fix and how to address. We're kind of flying this plane a bit as we're building it. But that doesn't mean that we should not continue to speak truth to power, and that we shouldn't continue to hold those accountable who would continue to lead these false narratives. Right now, we have a president that refuses to concede an election that he clearly has lost. We have a president-elect that has an agenda that he needs to begin to build out, to begin to have the proper resources, the proper access to information for his team in order to be as successful as possible, not just for himself or for his legacy, but for all of America, and to be frank, for our partners as well. They rely on us in a myriad of ways, in a variety of instances, and it is important for President-elect Biden to have the access to these resources. So when you have half the electorate, we could say, arguing that he did not rightfully win the election and there needs to be continuous recounts and litigation over this, that is a problem. So there really is an issue within our political discourse that we're going to have to detangle and figure out how we actually, quite frankly, deprogram a lot of these folks that have believe in QAnon and believe in conspiracy theories and believe in these issues that are plaguing us and really exacerbating, the issues that are already problematic within our political system right now as well.
It's very much a sign of the times, isn't it? Just a few days ago, I was watching on CBS News, there was Gayle King was interviewing former President Obama. And he said, for example, you can have any debate you like about climate change and what we should do about it, all sorts of things to say about it. It's just really difficult if you're talking to somebody who just says it isn't happening. And this applies, it appears, to many other issues as well. There's a question from the audience, from Dixon Osborne, I think. Hello, Dixon, and thanks for the question. And this is for Tawakkol, Karman and Kolinda Grabar-Kitarović. And the question is, based on your experiences, respectively, in Yemen and Croatia, what advice do you have for Americans who worry about the state of their democracy? As a non-American myself, I'm always a little reluctant to tell Americans, give Americans my advice, and I'm certainly not suggesting you should tell Americans what to do. But what if there's something that they should think about? Let's just put it that way. Tawakkol, what would it be?
I really trust American people. I trust them because they are the one who is willing to protect American values and American democracy. Either if it's, America under Trump administration or any other administration. American people learned a lot under this, the current, administration, learned how to say no, learned how to go to the street, learned how to raise their voice, learned how to be with the people. We notice a lot of, American people go to the street supporting Muslims, against, Muslims ban, supporting, Mexican people, supporting women. So this is a very new, great era of new struggle of American people who can protect their democracy and who can protect the world. Now, as you said also before, in your question, all the problem especially in the Middle East, it is not just the result of the current administration. The current administration, yes, they spread the hatred, they make the problems more complicated, but also there is more problems before because of the previous administrations that they deal. And maybe if they will go to the authority again, they will continue their dealing with the dictators. So I'm calling the American people to protect their democracy for America first and for the world second, and also to prevent any administration from contributing, from supporting, from any kind of alliance with any dictator around the world, especially in our Arab world, because those dictators pose a risk against the global security, against American national security. So they should. I am so trust and confidence that they can do, especially the young people in America. They can, they can protect America democracy, American values, and also they can make America, doing its responsibility to American people and also to all of people around the world.
Kolinda, as a former president, you're definitely not going to tell America what to do. Protocol forbids it, and I'm not asking you to tell America what to do. But, as friends, we can offer a bit of advice. And your country, as we've discussed throughout this this session, does have lessons for all of us to learn. What would you be suggesting that America can learn from your own country?
Absolutely. You're right, Robin. I don't want to, give lectures to anyone, but I want to tell you about my own experience. You mentioned in the beginning the war in Croatia, and my youth was marked by that war. I grew up in that war, and it made me appreciate peace. At the time, just actually a couple of days ago, we marked the fall of the city of Vukovar, which was the greatest tragedy in Croatia. It was completely razed to the ground. And as I was sitting in bomb cellars at the time, what I was thinking, really, I have to say honestly, at the time, that there is no way that we and Serbs are going to live together side by side for centuries to come. However, fortunately, I was wrong. Due to the wiseness of the people, first and foremost, their desire for peace and for a better future, due to our leaders and the international community who helped us, we found a way to peace and reconciliation. So what I can tell to all Americans, please do protect your values. Fight for your values using all the democratic means, because you have them, and we didn't in the former Yugoslavia. And please do not descend into violence. It should not even be a last resort in a democratic society. Violence just leads to a further circle of violence. Talk to each other, listen to each other, and do be vigilant that you continue with the democratic processes, that you don't take any steps back, because that is very important for the rest of us as well.
Kolinda, thank you. And that is actually a terrific point to end on. I mean, it's a very difficult discussion. I don't think we've shirked the tough issues. People can watch this again, and I think should watch it again. There's a lot of value in here. I'll certainly watch it again. Kolinda Grabar-Kitarović, former president of Croatia, Tawakkol Karman, Nobel Peace Laureate and founder of Women Journalists Without Chains in Yemen, and Bishop Garrison, co-founder and president of the Rainey Center, joining us from Alexandria. Thank you so much and have a lovely weekend.
Thank you.
Thank you.